Thank you, everybody. Wow. How is everybody this morning? Good? Glad to have so many people here. Guess where I was last weekend? Abby, where was I last weekend? That's a little too close, I think. I was in Pigeon Forge with the youth. And when we were in Pigeon Forge, we learned something very important. So let me ask you a question. I recently had a car that broke down on the road. And so actually it wasn't my car, it was my husband's car. But when he called me and he told me that he was broken down, why couldn't I tell him just to push the car home? Because it's too heavy? Because he was not strong enough to push that car home. I had to call a tow truck, right? Because we are not strong as Jesus, right? Are we as strong as Jesus? No, we are weak. And when we were away, we learned that even though we are weak, and I mean weak in a little bit of a different sense, I mean weak in that we make mistakes, right? We're not perfect. But even though we are weak, we are strong through Him. He takes our imperfections and He turns them into strengths. Did you catch the Bible verse that was on the wall earlier? It's 2 Corinthians 12:9, and it says that my grace is enough for you because power is made perfect in weakness. So our weaknesses become power through Jesus Christ. Is that pretty important? Is that pretty important? Yeah, so I have a little story here about a guy named Paul. He was a friend of Jesus's, and he learned something very interesting as a follower of Christ. He found that it wasn't up to him to make sure that everything was successful. Sometimes Paul couldn't keep from going through bad situations. He learned that God faithfully finished the work that needed to be done. All Paul had to do was trust in God. Even when Paul probably thought things were a disaster that he couldn't fix, God had no difficulty making sure everything would go according to God's will. We can praise God because we know that things would turn out differently without His strength and involvement. So isn't it a relief that we can make mistakes and we can be imperfect, and all we have to do is trust that God will make it right? Isn't that nice? Can you guys pray with me real quick? Dear God, thank you for loving me. Thank you for forgiving me. When I do something wrong. Lord, help me to do what you want me to do. And give me forgiveness when I don't. In His name I pray. Amen.
Good morning. So this past weekend, Shane, Jack, Ethan, Zachary, and I visited the Voices United program in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. We, along with about 5,000 youth from all over the country, gathered to worship with God and learn more about how we can serve Him. The main thing that was talked about was the three graces: prevenient grace, justifying grace, and sanctifying grace. Prevenient grace is the grace that comes to us before we know God. Justifying grace is when we find pardon for our sin. Sanctifying grace is a purifying and cleansing process that continues throughout our lives as disciples of Jesus Christ. We all had a great time and learned a lot about connecting with God and always keeping our bond with Him strong, no matter what we are going through. We learned that if we are going through a hardship or difficult time, that we should look to God for guidance and help instead of turning our backs on Him and losing our strong relationship with God that we have and will continue to work on obtaining. Something that we should never forget is that God will always be with us and will always forgive us for the things that we have done wrong. Serving God is something that we should always strive to do because He has done so much for us. Shane, Ethan, Zachary, Jack, and I had a very fun time in Tennessee, and we are very grateful for your prayers, kind words, and support. Thank you. And also a very big thank you to Cindy and Jay for always helping us with whatever we need and their endless support.